Every December he appears. In every shopping mall, every street corner, every screen. A jolly figure in red, watching, judging, rewarding the good. But 1700 years ago, in a city that no longer exists, a bishop performed miracles that would echo through time. And what began as one man's legend would transform into something far stranger. From a Turkish saint who commanded storms and raised the dead, to the Norse god who rode through winter skies collecting souls, to the horned demons who dragged children into the night, to the 13 trickster spirits who stole sausages and slammed doors, to the ice wizard who commanded winter itself. Tonight, we trace the true evolution of the world's most recognized and most misunderstood figure. But before there was a saint, before there was Nicholas, before Christianity spread across the frozen north, there was Odin, the All-Father, king of the Norse gods, and in the darkest nights of winter, he led the wild hunt. A ghostly procession of spirits and the dead, riding through the winter sky, collecting souls, judging the living, and those who left offerings at their doorsteps, those who honored the gods during Yule, the winter solstice celebration. They received gifts. Odin rode Sleipnir, an 8-legged horse that could fly through the sky faster than the wind. 8 legs, 8 reindeer. The connection is difficult to ignore. But when Christianity arrived in Northern Europe, the church faced a problem. They couldn't eliminate Yule, couldn't erase Odin. The traditions were too deeply rooted. The people wouldn't let them go. So instead, they transformed them. They took the flying god, the winter judge, the gift giver who watched and rewarded, and they gave him a new name. Nicholas. The year is 270 CE. The place is Myra, a city on the southern coast of what we now call Turkey. But then, it was Lycia, part of the Roman Empire, and Christianity was illegal. Nicholas was born to a wealthy Greek Christian family. His parents died when he was young, leaving him their fortune. And he gave it all away. The story goes like this. A man in his city had fallen into poverty. He had 3 daughters, and in the Roman world, daughters without dowries have few options. The father was considering selling them into prostitution. For 3 nights, Nicholas crept to their home in darkness, and through the window he threw bags of gold. 1 for each daughter. Enough for their dowries. Enough to save them. This is why we give gifts in secret. Why we don't take credit. Why the magic is in the mystery. 3 bags of gold. 3 daughters. 3 golden balls that would become the symbol of pawnbrokers across Europe. The number 3 repeating. The Trinity. The sacred number. Around the year 300, Nicholas became the Bishop of Myra. He was young for such a position, but his generosity, his faith, had already made him legendary. And then the persecutions began. Emperor Diocletian ordered the arrest of all Christian leaders. Nicholas was imprisoned, tortured, but he survived. And when Constantine legalized Christianity in 313, Nicholas was released. He returned to Myra, and the stories began to multiply. The darkest story, the one the church doesn't often tell. 3 boys traveling to the city to study. They stopped at an inn for the night. The innkeeper was a butcher, and that winter meat was scarce. He murdered the 3 boys, dismembered them, and pickled them in a barrel, intending to sell their flesh as pork. Nicholas arrived at the inn. Somehow, he knew what had happened. He confronted the butcher. And then he performed a miracle. He prayed over the barrel, made the sign of the cross. And the three boys rose, all alive. This is why Nicholas became the patron saint of children, the protector, the one who brings them back from darkness. But there's something else in this story, something darker. The barrel, the three, the winter preservation. These are ancient symbols, older than Christianity, death and resurrection, the cycle of the seasons. Nicholas was absorbing the old magic, becoming something more than a bishop. Another story. Sailors caught in a deadly storm on the Mediterranean, the ship breaking apart. No hope of survival. They prayed to Nicholas, the bishop they'd heard about, the miracle worker. And he appeared. Not in person. Nicholas was in Myra, but his ghost, his spirit, materialized on the ship. He took the wheel, calmed the storm, guided them to shore. When the sailors reached Myra to give thanks, they found Nicholas in his church. He smiled. "I know," he said. "I was there." This established him as the patron saint of sailors, of travelers, of anyone who journeys through danger. But it also established something else. Nicholas could be in two places at once. He could appear when called. He could traverse impossible distances. He was becoming something beyond human, beyond death itself. During a terrible famine in Myra, imperial grain ships passed through the harbour, bound for Constantinople. The emperor's orders were clear. All grain must reach the capital. Nicholas went to the ships. He spoke with the sailors. Somehow, he convinced them to unload a portion of their grain. "Don't worry," he told them. "When you reach Constantinople, your cargo will be complete." The sailors agreed. They unloaded grain for the starving city, and when they reached the capital, their holds were full. The grain had never diminished. Nicholas was bending reality, multiplying resources, providing abundance from scarcity. These weren't just miracles. They were the acts of a folkloric figure, a supernatural being who could break the laws of nature. Nicholas died on December 6, 343 CE. He was buried in the Cathedral of Myra. And then something strange began to happen. His tomb started weeping. Not water, ma, a sweet-smelling oil with healing properties. It seeped from the stone, constantly, miraculously. Pilgrims came from across the Christian world to pray at his tomb, to collect the sacred myrrh, to be healed. For 700 years the tomb wept, and Nicholas's legend grew. But in 1087, everything changed. Myra had fallen under Muslim control. The Christian pilgrimage site was at risk. The tomb might be destroyed. So Italian merchants from the city of Byzantine remade a decision. They would steal the saints' bones. They sailed to Myra in secret, broke into the cathedral at night, opened the tomb, and they took Nicholas's remains. They justified it as rescue, as preservation, but it was theft, sacred theft. The bones were brought to Byzantine. A massive basilica was built to house them, and pilgrims flocked there instead. This theft spread Nicholas's cult across Europe. His veneration exploded, and as his bones traveled west, so did his stories. Stories that would merge with older, darker traditions. Stories that would transform a Turkish bishop into something entirely new. Nicholas was heading north, into lands where Odin still whispered in the winter winds, where old gods and new saints would collide. and where the gift giver would gain companions. Dark companions. As Nicholas's legend spread north, it encountered something ancient. In Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, the people believed in the Tomte. In some regions, the Nisse. These were household spirits, small, bearded creatures who lived in barns and attics, who protected the farm, the animals, the family. But they were not benevolent by nature. If you didn't leave them a bowl of porridge on Christmas Eve, if you disrespected them, mistreated your animals, they would cause chaos, sicken your livestock, spoil your milk, break your tools. These spirits weren't about Christmas. They weren't Christian at all. They were tied to ancestor worship, to the land itself. But as Christianity took hold, the church couldn't eliminate them. The people wouldn't let the Tomte go. So gradually, the household spirit and the saint merged. The Tomte became Yulenis en, the Christmas man, a gift bringer, but one who still demanded respect, still watched, still judged. In Sweden, there was another tradition, the Yule goat, a straw figure, sometimes massive, built for the winter festival. Originally, the goat was frightening, demanding, connected to Thor's goats that pulled his chariot across the sky. But over time, the goat transformed. It began bringing gifts instead of demanding them, and eventually emerged with the Tomte figure, creating Yule Tomten, the Swedish gift bringer still connected to that ancient animal power. But there's another piece to this puzzle, one that's often overlooked. The Sami people, indigenous to the Arctic regions of Scandinavia, the only European culture that herds reindeer. Sami shamans had a tradition. During the winter solstice, they would perform ceremonies. They would collect Amini Tamaskaria, red and white mushrooms, hallucinogenic, sacred. The reindeer would eat these mushrooms, and the shamans would drink the reindeer's urine, which filtered and concentrated the psychoactive compounds. This would induce visions, out-of-body experiences, the sensation of flying. The shamans wore red and white, the colors of the sacred mushroom. They would enter homes through the smoke hole in the roof, because in deep winters no blocked the doors. The smoke hole, the chimney. They brought gifts, dried mushrooms for healing, blessings for the household. And in their visions they flew, with the reindeer, across the winter sky. Red and white clothing, flying reindeer, entering through the chimney, bringing gifts in winter. When Christian missionaries encountered these traditions, when the stories of Nicholas spread this far north, imagery merged. The 8-legged horse became 8 reindeer. The shamanistic journey became a magical flight. The sacred mushroom colors became Santa's suit. We don't know for certain, but the parallels are striking. And they remind us that nothing about this figure is simple. Nothing is purely Christian or purely pagan. It's all connected, layered, transformed. In Iceland, the traditions took a darker turn. Here, there was no gentle saint, no jolly gift giver. Instead, there were 13 creatures, troll-like, mischievous, sometimes dangerous. The Jólasveinar, the Yule lads. But first, their mother, Ridenour, a giantess, a troll who lived in the mountains, and she had a very specific appetite. She ate children, particularly naughty children. During the 13 days before Christmas, Ridenour would descend from her cave. She could detect misbehavior, sense disobedience, and she would take those children, carry them back to her cave in a sack, and cook them in her massive cauldron. Ridenour also had a pet, the Yule cat, a massive black cat larger than a house. And the Yule cat had a very specific rule. If you didn't receive new clothes for Christmas, the cat would eat you. This was actually a way to encourage productivity. Families would work hard to finish weaving and sewing before Christmas, so everyone would have something new to wear. But the imagery is terrifying. A giant cat stalking through the winter darkness, hunting those who hadn't been productive enough. And then there were Ridenour's sons, 13 of them, each with their own personality, their own particular mischief. They would visit, one per night in the 13 nights leading to Christmas. And each had a name that described what they did. Sheepcote Claude. He harassed sheep trying to nurse from the ewes. Gully Gawk. He hid in gullies stealing milk from cowsheds. Stubby. Short and stout, he stole pans to eat the crusty bits stuck to them. Spoon Licker. He stole wooden spoons to lick them clean. He was painfully thin from his limited diet. Pot Scraper. He stole pots and scraped the residue from them. Bowl Licker. He hid under beds, waiting for people to put down their bowls, then licked them clean. Door Slammer. He arrived at night and slammed doors, over and over, preventing sleep. Sky Gobbler. He had an enormous appetite for Skyr, Icelandic yogurt. He would eat every bit in the house. Sausage Swiper. He hid in the rafters and stole sausages being smoked for winter storage. Window Peeper. He peered through windows in the darkness, watching people, looking for things to steal. Doorway Sniffer. He had an abnormally large nose and would sniff at doorways, trying to find loaf or broth, traditional Christmas bread, to steal. Meat Hook. He used a hook to steal smoked lamb and other meat hanging in storehouses. A Candle Stealer. He followed children around, trying to steal their candles, which were made from tallow and technically edible. The tradition evolved. Children would leave their shoes in the window. One of the Yule lads would visit each night. If you'd been good, you'd receive a small gift. Fruit. Candy. If you'd been bad, you'd wait to find a rotting potato in your shoe. These weren't gift-bringers like Nicholas. They were tricksters. Norse folklore spirits adapted to Christmas. Creatures who embodied the chaos of winter, the scarcity of resources, the very real dangers of the season. And the message was clear. Winter required discipline, required hard work, required respect for the rules. Or the darkness would take you. In the Germanic regions, the Alps, Austria, Bavaria, the split between good and evil became even more pronounced. Nicholas would bring gifts to good children. But the bad children? They belonged to someone else. Krampus. Half goat, half demon, covered in dark fur, horns curling from his head, a long pointed tongue hanging from his mouth. He carried chains, bells, and a basket on his back. On the night of December 5th, Krampus nacht, Krampus would accompany St. Nicholas through the villages. Nicholas would question the children. Had they been good? Said their prayers? Obeyed their parents? The good children received sweets, nuts, fruit. The bad children met Krampus. He would beat them with birch branches, not gently. This was punishment meant to terrify. And the very worst children, the truly wicked, he would stuff them in his basket and carry them away. To where? The stories vary. To hell, to his lair, to drown them in a river. But they were never seen again. Krampus is an ancient history. The tradition never died. In Austria, Bavaria, parts of Switzerland, Krampus runs still happen. Young men dress as demons, wear elaborate masks and costumes, and parade through the streets. They chase people. They are allowed to be threatening. And it's wild, chaotic, dangerous. The tradition has even spread to America in recent years. People are reclaiming the darkness, the fear, the punishment side of the Christmas season. Because Krampus represents something we've lost. The understanding that winter was dangerous, that misbehavior had consequences, that not everyone deserved rewards. But Krampus wasn't the only dark companion. In German-American communities, particularly Pennsylvania Dutch, there was Belsnickel. He wore ragged furs. His face was dirty, frightening. He carried both a switch for punishment and candy for reward. He would arrive before Christmas and test children. Ask them to recite prayers, demonstrate good behavior. Pass the test? Candy. Fail? The switch. And then there was Net Ruprecht, Servant Rupert, another companion of Nicholas in Germanic tradition. He wore dark, ragged clothing, carried a staff, sometimes with a bell, and a sack. He would ask children if they could pray, if they knew their catechism. Those who could were rewarded, those who couldn't were disciplined, or taken. But something interesting happened during the Protestant Reformation in the 1500s. Martin Luther rejected the Catholic veneration of saints, including Nicholas. So he created an alternative, the Christkind. The Christ child, sometimes depicted as a young blonde angel, sometimes as the Christ child himself. The Christkind brought gifts on Christmas Eve, December 24th, not December 6th like Nicholas. This tradition took hold in Protestant regions, Germany, Austria, parts of Switzerland, and it still persists today, separate from the Nicholas tradition. It shows how religious politics shape folklore, how the same figure could split into different versions depending on theology. But even in Protestant regions, the Dark Companions remained, because people needed them. Needed the fear, needed a balance of reward and punishment. In the Netherlands, Nicholas remained, but he evolved into something distinctly Dutch. Sinterklaas. He arrives not from the North Pole, but from Spain, by steamboat, in mid-November. He still wears his bishop's robes, his mitre, his staff. He looks like the original Nicholas, not the American Santa. And he rides a white horse, Amerigo, not reindeer. This horse can run across rooftops, can leap from building to building. Children leave their shoes by the fireplace, with carrots and hay for the horse. And in the morning, if they've been good, the shoes are filled with small gifts, candy, coins, toys. But Sinterklaas doesn't come alone. He has helpers, called Zwarte Piet, Black Pete. Traditionally depicted in blackface, wearing Renaissance-era clothing, carrying the book that contains the list of who's been naughty and nice. In older versions, Zwarte Piet was explicitly threatening, a Moorish demon, a captured devil forced to serve the saint. He carried a sack, and if children had been very bad, he would threaten to take them back to Spain in the sack. In recent decades, Zwarte Piet has become intensely controversial. Accusations of racism, debate about tradition versus harm. The character has evolved in some regions, changed to set marks instead of full blackface, or replaced entirely. It's a reminder that folklore is alive, that traditions must evolve, that what was acceptable in one era becomes problematic in another. The companion figure, the Dark Helper, persists, but its form must change with cultural understanding. But Sinterklaas himself remains beloved in the Netherlands. December 5th, Sinterklaasavond, is the main gift-giving day. Christmas Day, December 25th, is secondary, a religious observance. The gifts come from the saint, not from a commercialized Santa. And this is important, because when Dutch settlers came to America, they brought Santa Claus with them. And in the New World, his name would change. Santa Claus would become Santa Claus. Nicholas's influence spread eastward as well, into Czechoslovakia, Poland, Hungary. Each culture adapted him, gave him local flavor. In the Czech lands, Svatý Mikuláš arrives on December 5th, but he doesn't come alone. He is accompanied by an angel and a devil. The angel represents goodness, mercy, the possibility of salvation. The devil represents temptation, punishment, the consequences of sin. Children are questioned. They must recite prayers, demonstrate they've been good. The angel advocates for them. The devil accuses. Mikuláš judges. Good children receive fruit and candy. Bad children receive coal and potatoes, or the devil threatens to take them. It's a theological drama, performed in homes across the country, teaching children about morality, about consequence, about the cosmic battle between good and evil. In Poland, Santa Claus maintained his December 6th tradition even through the communist era. The communist government tried to replace him with Ded Moroz, the Russian grandfather frost, to secularize the tradition, to remove the Christian saint. But after 1989, after the fall of communism, Mikołaj returned, stronger than ever. Though now it is merged somewhat with American Santa imagery, red suit instead of bishop's robes, but the December 6th date remains. In Hungary, Mikuláš also visits December 6th. Children polish their boots and place them in the window. Good children find candy, chocolate coins wrapped in gold foil. Bad children find virgach, golden painted twigs, a warning. These Eastern European traditions matter because they show how Nicholas spread across the entire Christian world, how each culture shaped him to fit their needs, their values, their existing beliefs. He wasn't imposed uniformly. He was adapted, made local, made real. But in Russia, something different happened. Here, Nicholas merged with a figure far older, far more powerful. Ded Moroz, Grandfather Frost. Ded Moroz predates Christianity in Russia. He's a winter spirit, a deity of the cold itself. In the oldest stories, he was dangerous. Moroz they called him, a demon who froze travelers to death, who turned people into ice sculptures. He had to be appeased, given offerings, shown respect. During winter solstice celebrations, families would leave him porridge, bread, sometimes meat, to ensure he wouldn't freeze their crops, wouldn't kill their livestock. But over centuries, as Christianity spread, Moroz transformed. He became less demon, more wizard, less death, more winter magic. And he gained a companion, Snaigi Raka, the Snow Maiden. She's not his wife. She's his granddaughter, born from snow itself. Beautiful, ethereal, made of ice and winter light. She helps him deliver gifts, interacts with children. But she's fragile. In some versions of her story, she melts in the spring, dies when the sun grows warm. She's temporary, beautiful but doomed. A perfect metaphor for winter's magic. During the Soviet era, religion was suppressed. St. Nicholas was banned. But Ded Moroz, he was rebranded as a secular figure, a New Year's gift bringer, not a Christmas one. New Year's became the major winter celebration. Ded Moroz brought gifts on New Year's Eve, January 1st. And this tradition persists, even after the fall of the Soviet Union, even with Orthodox Christmas celebrated again on January 7th. Ded Moroz remains the gift bringer. New Year's remains the celebration. He doesn't ride a sleigh pulled by reindeer. He walks, or rides a troika, a traditional Russian sleigh pulled by 3 horses. He doesn't enter through chimneys. He knocks on the door. He's invited in like a guest. And children must perform for their gifts, recite a poem, sing a song, demonstrate worthiness. He carries a staff, a magical staff that can freeze anything it touches, that commands the winter itself. He wears blue or silver, not red, the colors of ice, of snow, of winter's heart. Ded Moroz is not Santa Claus. He's separate, distinct. He's what happens when an ancient winter deity absorbs Christian saint imagery but remains fundamentally pagan. He's older, more primal, more connected to the land, to winter itself. And in Russia, he's far more beloved than any Western import could ever be. In Britain, the tradition evolved differently once again. There was Father Christmas, but originally he had nothing to do with children or gifts or Saint Nicholas. He was the personification of Christmas itself, a spirit of feasting, drinking, celebration. Charles Dickens cemented this in A Christmas Carol, the ghost of Christmas present, large, jolly, wearing a green robe and a crown of holly. He represented abundance, community, the joy of the season for adults, not children. But in the 20th century, as American culture spread globally, Father Christmas and Santa Claus merged. Father Christmas took on Santa's characteristics: the gift-giving, the North Pole, the reindeer. But he kept his British name. Today, British children leave mince pies and brandy for Father Christmas, carrots for the reindeer. He's essentially American Santa with a British accent. The original Father Christmas, the adult celebration figure, has been absorbed. Another example of how American commercialization would eventually homogenize these diverse traditions. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. (1600s). The Dutch established New Amsterdam, what would become New York City. And they brought their traditions with them. Sinterklaas celebrations. December 5th, the bishop on his white horse. But in the New World, things changed. English settlers had their Father Christmas, but it was a minor tradition. The Puritans actually banned Christmas celebrations entirely. Too pagan, too Catholic, too indulgent. But the Dutch kept Sinterklaas alive, and slowly the name transformed. Sinterklaas, Saint Nicholas, Santa Claus. In 1809, American author Washington Irving published A Satirical History of New York. He embellished the Dutch traditions, made them more whimsical, more magical. He depicted Saint Nicholas flying over treetops in a wagon, dropping gifts down chimneys. Irving was joking, satirizing, but people took him seriously. And the American Santa Claus began to take shape. Then, in 1823, a poem appeared in a New York newspaper. A visit from St. Nicholas. You know it as 'twas the night before Christmas. Written by Clement Clark Moore, a professor and poet. And this poem changed everything. Moore invented the reindeer. Named them Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen, Comet, Cupid, Donder, Blitzen. 8 reindeer, like Odin's 8-legged horse, the connection persisting. He invented the chimney entrance, the sleigh landing on the roof. He described Santa as chubby and plump, a right jolly old oaf. He gave him the finger aside of the nose gesture. And he made him smoke a pipe. None of this was from Nicholas tradition, none from Sinterklaas. This was pure American invention. But it worked. The poem became wildly popular, reprinted every Christmas, memorized by children. The American Santa was being born. During the Civil War, 1863 to 1886, political cartoonist Thomas Nast drew Santa Claus for Harper's Weekly magazine. Nast created the visual we know today. He drew Santa living at the North Pole, in a workshop, with a list of who's been naughty and nice. He invented Mrs. Claus, gave Santa a wife, a domestic partner, to make him less threatening, more Victorian, more acceptable. He standardized the red suit, made Santa larger, more grandfatherly. And most importantly, he drew Santa supporting the Union troops during the Civil War. Santa became American, patriotic, a symbol of Northern Christian commercial values. The European saint was becoming an American icon. Now, there's a myth that needs to be addressed. People often claim Coca-Cola invented Santa Claus, or at least invented his red suit. This is false. But what Coca-Cola did do, starting in 1931 with artist Haddon Sundblom, was standardize the exact look. The specific shade of red, the exact proportions, the warm, grandfatherly smile, the twinkle in the eye. Sundblom's Santa appeared in Coca-Cola advertisements for decades. The same Santa, the same face, the same costume. And because Coca-Cola advertised globally, this image spread worldwide. Post-World War II, as American culture became dominant, Sundblom's Santa became the universal Santa. The Turkish bishop, the Norse god, the Germanic demons, the Dutch sailor, the Russian ice wizard. All compressed, simplified, commercialized, made palatable, made sellable. And what was lost? The bishop's religious significance, the orthodox mystery, the spiritual depth, the punishment, the fear, the darkness. Krampus, Sivar, Tapit, the Yule lads, all erased. The cultural specificity, the regional variations, the local magic. In their place, a jolly grandfather, a toy factory CEO, a brand mascot. Universal, unthreatening, profitable. But something else was lost too. The understanding that winter was dangerous, that survival required discipline, that not everyone deserved rewards. The fear that made the gift meaningful. American Santa became pure reward, pure kindness, pure commercialism. And that made him somehow less real. But American Santa spread everywhere, even where it made no sense. Australia, South America, South Africa. Where December is summer, where Christmas comes during the hottest months of the year. Try to imagine it. Santa Claus in a fur-trimmed red suit, in 100-degree heat. Some places adapted. Santa in board shorts. Santa at the beach. Santa pulled by kangaroos instead of reindeer. There's even a song. 6 white boomers. Kangaroos pulling Santa's sleigh across the Australian outback. It's charming, but also absurd. Some Australian families celebrate Christmas in July instead. Winter Christmas, when the imagery actually makes sense. But most persist with December 25th, with images of snow and winter that have nothing to do with their lived experience. Because American culture, American marketing, American Santa became so dominant that local context didn't matter. The same happened in Brazil, Argentina, Chile, South Africa, New Zealand. Winter imagery imposed on summer, a northern European tradition transplanted to the southern hemisphere. Another layer of colonialism, cultural imperialism through Christmas cards. And in Africa, Asia, indigenous communities worldwide, Santa Claus arrived with Christian missionaries. Another imported tradition, another foreign god. In many places, Santa was and is viewed as Western, foreign, commercial rather than cultural. In former Spanish colonies, the Three Kings tradition, Los Reyes Magos, remained stronger. January 6th, the biblical Magi bringing gifts. This had cultural and religious roots. This made sense. Santa was the American import, the commercial overlay. Japan is an interesting case. Christmas has no religious significance there. Only 2% of the population is Christian. But in the 1970s, KFC launched a marketing campaign, Kentucky for Christmas. It became tradition. Families order KFC for Christmas dinner, book reservations months in advance. Christmas became a commercial holiday, a date night for couples, a chance to buy gifts and eat fried chicken. Santa exists there, in decorations, in advertising, but he's pure symbol, pure aesthetic. No folklore, no tradition, no belief. Just a fat man in red selling products. And this is what American commercialization achieved. It spread one version of Santa globally, made him universal, recognizable everywhere. But in doing so, it stripped away the regional magic, the local spirits, the cultural specificity. The dozens of gift bringers, each tied to their land, their people, their stories. Reduced to one face, one red suit, one commercial message. Buy, consume, repeat. But the mythology didn't stop there. Even as Santa became commercial, people kept adding to the story. Building the world, making it more elaborate. Creating a mythology that children could believe in, and adults could exploit.
Mrs. Claus was looking good yesterday. Out of the way, please!
Once Santa became American, the mythology expanded. People wanted more, wanted details, wanted a complete world. Where does he live? How does he make the toys? Who helps him? And so the story grew. Thomas Nast, the same cartoonist who standardized Santa's appearance, placed him at the North Pole in 1866. Why the North Pole? It was the height of Arctic exploration, the race to reach the top of the world. Mystery and danger and national pride. The North Pole was unreachable, unknown. No one could go there and prove Santa didn't exist. It was the perfect location. And symbolically, it made sense. The top of the world, the axis point, the place where all directions are south. Santa at the center, watching the entire globe. The workshop came next. Santa as manufacturer, as manager of production. This was the Industrial Revolution. Factories were transforming society, labor, economy. And Santa became a factory owner. A benevolent one, certainly, but a capitalist nonetheless. He made toys, managed inventory, kept lists, distributed products globally, on schedule, one night per year. The ultimate logistics operation. And he needed a wife. Mrs. Claus first appeared in an 1849 short story, but she didn't become popular until later. She was added to domesticate Santa, to make him less threatening to Victorian sensibilities. A married man, a grandfather figure, settled, safe. Mrs. Claus bakes cookies, keeps the house, supports her husband's work. She's barely present in most traditions, rarely has a first name, rarely appears in stories. She exists to make Santa respectable. Interestingly, in other cultures, she doesn't exist at all. Sinter Claus has no wife, neither does Ded Moroz. He has his granddaughter, Snegurochka, but that's a different dynamic entirely. The Seskas is specifically American, Victorian, a product of her time. But who makes the toys? Santa can't do it alone. Not for millions of children. Billions now. He needs workers. Enter the elves. But here's the thing. Elves weren't originally part of the Nicholas tradition. They came from Nordic folklore, the Tomte, the Nisse household spirits we discussed earlier. But in America, they were appropriated, transformed. Lewis and Mayocott wrote a poem in 1855 mentioning elves helping Santa. But they really took off with Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer in 1949, and the Rankin-Slash-based TV specials in the 1960s. The elves became Santa's labor force, his employees. Small, cheerful, perpetually happy to work. Never striking, never demanding better conditions. They wear little uniforms. They sing while they work. They are the idealized industrial worker, content, productive, grateful for the opportunity to serve. There's something deeply capitalist about this imagery. Santa's CEO, Alice's workers who love their exploitation. The workshop is utopian factory where labor is joy. It's mythology that serves a purpose. Teaching children that work is good. That hierarchy is natural. That some beings exist to serve others. And everyone's happy about it. But the most disturbing part of the modern Santa mythology. The surveillance. He sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He knows if you've been bad or good. Santa is omniscient, always watching, recording every action, every word, every thought. This replaced community oversight, replaced the church, replaced social accountability. In small communities, everyone watched everyone. Social pressure maintained order. But as societies grew, as anonymity increased, a new control mechanism was needed. An omniscient authority figure, one who couldn't be fooled, who saw everything. God, certainly, but God was abstract, distant, theological. Santa was concrete, immediate, and he had a list. You better watch out. You better not cry. This is threat language, behavior modification through fear of being observed. Children are taught from infancy that an unseen authority watches them constantly, judges them, records their actions, and once a year delivers judgment, reward or punishment based on behavior. It's training for life in a surveillance society, for accepting that privacy is conditional, that observation is normal, that powerful entities have the right to watch you, judge you, control you. And you should be grateful when they reward you. But there is another element, the magic of belief itself. Children are told Santa only comes if you believe, if you're asleep, if you don't try to see him. The magic requires not questioning, not investigating, accepting the mystery. And in exchange for that blind faith, gifts appear. Cookies are eaten. Proof of the impossible. It's a covenant. Believe and receive. Doubt and the magic dies. Parents maintain the lie. Society maintains the lie. Everyone conspires to preserve the mystery. Until the child figures it out. There comes a moment, for almost every child, when they figure it out. Average age is 7 or 8, sometimes younger, sometimes older. But the realization arrives. Maybe they recognize the handwriting on a gift tag. Maybe they catch parents assembling toys on Christmas Eve. Maybe an older sibling tells them. Maybe they just start thinking logically. How does one man visit every house in one night? How do reindeer fly? And the magic breaks. The psychological impact varies. Some children are devastated. It's the first major lie they've been told by trusted adults, parents, teachers, everyone they believed in. It shakes their faith in authority, in truth, in the world itself. Others are relieved. They suspected. Now they know. The cognitive dissonance resolves. But there's a common thread. Thus, the loss of magic, the loss of wonder, the loss of a world where impossible things happen. This is often cited as the end of childhood innocence, the first real step into the adult world of skepticism and rationality. But it's also something else. The beginning of conspiracy. Once children know the truth, they are asked to keep the secret. For younger siblings, for younger cousins. They become part of the conspiracy, part of the lie. They learn that sometimes we lie to protect magic, to preserve wonder for others. They learn that adults maintain fictions for complex reasons, sometimes kind reasons. And they learn their first lesson in the social contract. We agree to certain shared fictions. We participate in communal myths, because they serve a purpose. Growing up means learning when to believe, when to pretend, and when to question. But here's the strange thing. Why do we do this? Why do parents lie to their children, maintain an elaborate deception, invest time and money in a fiction? Some say it preserves childhood wonder, gives children something magical to believe in. Some say it teaches generosity, the joy of giving without taking credit. Some say it's behavioral control, the naughty and nice list, surveillance through mythology. But maybe it's simpler. Maybe we do it because we wish it were true. When children stop believing in Santa Claus the person, something shifts. But Christmas doesn't end. The magic doesn't completely die. It transforms. They stop believing in the man, but they start believing in the spirit. The spirit of Christmas, of giving, of family, of generosity. The magic shifts from external to internal, from a supernatural being to a choice we make. To give without expectation, to create joy for others, to participate in the ritual. And eventually, many become Santa themselves. Not literally, but performatively. They have children. They play the role. They hide the presents. They eat the cookies. They become the conspiracy, the magic makers. And in doing so, they understand something profound. Santa was never about the man. It was about the gift, the surprise, the joy on a child's face, the preservation of wonder. Was there ever a real Santa Claus? Bishop Nicholas was real. He lived. He gave. He became a legend. The magic around him was real, to believers, to those who experienced it. Does it matter that the gifts came from parents, not a saint, from factory workers, not elves? The tradition is real, the generosity is real, the community ritual is real. The idea of Santa Claus, the concept, the archetype. That's more real than any historical figure could ever be. Because ideas don't die. They evolve. They spread. They transform. And 1700 years after a Turkish bishop gave gold to 3 sisters, we're still giving, still believing, still preserving the magic. Even after we know it's not true. Maybe especially because we know it's not true. So why does this figure persist? Across cultures, across centuries, across belief systems. Why do we need the winter gift giver? Winter was death. For most of human history, winter meant scarcity, darkness, cold, the very real possibility that you wouldn't survive until spring. Food stores ran low, the weak died, the sun retreated, the world became hostile. And in that darkness, humans needed hope. The winter solstice, the shortest day, the longest night. But after that, the days begin to lengthen, the sun returns, life will come back. Every culture celebrated this, because it meant survival. And with that celebration came rituals, feasting, gift giving, community bonding. Because if we share now, if we're generous now, we survive together. The gift giver became the embodiment of that hope, that generosity, that promise that the darkness would end. Odin gave to those who honored him. Nicholas gave to those in need, the top reward of respect. Ded Moroz brought winter's magic. Claus judged and rewarded. Different faces, different rules, but the same core truth. Survive winter together. Share what you have, and something magical will happen. But there's something else, something deeper. The watching. Every version of the gift giver watches, judges, knows. This isn't just about gifts. It's about accountability. In small communities, everyone watched everyone. Social pressure maintained order. You couldn't escape your reputation. But as societies grew, as anonymity increased, we needed something else. An omniscient watcher. One who saw everything. Who couldn't be fooled. God, certainly. But God was abstract. Distant, forgiving perhaps too much. The gift giver was immediate, concrete, and he delivered judgment annually. Behave well all year, you get rewarded. Misbehave, you get coal, or nothing, or taken by Krampus, or eaten by Greek law. Consequences were clear, immediate, real to children. And through this mythology, we taught values. Generosity, honesty, obedience, community, respect. The gift giver became the enforcer of morality, the teacher of virtue. Not through commandments, not through punishment. Through magic, through wonder, through the promise of reward. And that's why he persists. Because humans need mythology, need stories, need rituals that teach and bind and give meaning. We need the winter darkness to have a light in it. We need to believe that generosity is rewarded, that someone watches and cares. That magic is possible. Despite everything, despite commercialization, despite secularization, despite children learning the truth, Santa persists. Why? We could abandon the tradition, Admit it's a lie. Stop pretending. Tell children from the beginning that parents buy the gifts, that reindeer don't fly, that magic isn't real. But we don't. Generation after generation, we maintain the fiction. Because the lie serves truth. It teaches children that impossible things can happen, that the world contains wonder, that belief itself has power. And when they learn the truth, when the magic dies, they learn something even more important. That adults will go to extraordinary lengths to create joy for them. That love expresses itself through effort, through sacrifice, through maintaining beautiful fictions. That the magic wasn't Santa. It was never Santa. The magic was the love that created him. And here's what's remarkable. The tradition evolves, adapts, survives. In an age of surveillance capitalism, Santa watches but is loved for it. In an age of income inequality, Santa gives to all equally. In an age of skepticism, Santa demands belief. And people participate, willingly, joyfully. Because we need it. Need the ritual. Need the myth. Need the magic. Even when we know better. Maybe especially because we know better. But something interesting is happening. People are seeking the darkness again. Krampus runs are spreading. Not just in Austria anymore. In America. In Britain. Across Europe. Young people dressing as demons. Chasing. Frightening. Reclaiming the punishment side of the tradition. In Iceland, the Yule lads never left. 13 nights. 13 visitors. Great loss still threatens. The Yule cat still hunts. It's not quaint. It's not sanitized. It's real folklore. Living folklore. Ded Moroz remains dominant in Russia and former Soviet states. Separate from Western Santa. Distinctly Slavic. Proudly different. And in Latin America, the Three Kings tradition maintains strength. January 6th. The biblical Magi. Not a commercial import, but a cultural tradition with roots. What this means is that folklore is alive. Not a museum piece. Not history. Alive. It evolves. It pushes back against homogenization. It reclaims what was sanitized. People need both the light and the dark, the reward and the punishment, the magic and the fear. The complete story, not the commercial reduction. And as people seek authenticity, seek meaning, seek connection to something older and deeper, they return to the originals, to Krampus, to the Yule lads, to Ded Moroz, to Nicholas himself. The many faces are returning. So we return to where we began. A figure in red, in every mall, on every screen, universal, recognized. But now you know. You know about the Turkish bishop who commanded storms and raised the dead. About the Norse god who rode through in disguise, collecting souls and rewarding offerings. About the horned demons who drag misbehaving children into the darkness. About the 13 tricksters who stole sausages and slammed doors and left rotting potatoes. About the ice wizard who commanded winter itself. About the Dutch bishop on his white horse arriving by ship from Spain. And about how all of them, every single one, was compressed and simplified and commercialized into one jolly grandfather. So which version is the real Santa Claus? Perhaps the better question is this. Why do we need him to be real? Because every culture created him, in one form or another. Because every culture needed him. A figure who watches through the winter darkness. Who judges? Who rewards the good? And punishes, or takes, or teaches the wicked. He sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. Not because he's magical, but because we made him that way. Because we needed to believe that someone was watching. Someone cared. Someone would reward us for trying to be good in a difficult world. 1700 years after a bishop gave gold in secret. Thousands of years after ancient humans celebrated their returning sun. We're still doing it. Still giving. Still believing. Still watching the winter darkness for signs of magic. And on winter nights, when the snow falls and the world grows quiet, something does watch from the darkness. Not Santa Claus, not the bishop, not the god, but the idea of him, the need for him, the magic we create because we need magic to exist. So this December, when you see him in a mall, on a screen, in a storefront window, remember, you're looking at a Turkish bishop who rose from death, a Norse god who flew through winter skies, a nice wizard who commands the cold, 1,000 tricksters and demons and spirits, all wearing the same red suit. And they're all watching. They've always been watching. Happy holidays.